السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll go through hadith number 33 from the 40 hadith of Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah. Briefly, inshallah ta'ala, and then after that I'll talk briefly about the night of the 15th of Sha'ban, inshallah ta'ala, that we are witnessing tonight. First of all, the hadith is one of the hadith that talks about a very important principle in matters of rights between people, or in the subject of al-qada, or judgment, and disputes. And it's always used and it's always referred to, and it sets a very clear foundation in situations of disputes among people. And that's also related to the hadith that is mentioned about the night of the middle of Sha'ban. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the proper knowledge and the tawfiq and the help to apply what we know. Really, we're not, to some people, we're not lacking knowledge in the sense of information, but we're lacking in the ilm, which is the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because as known that the ilm that is praised in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, the knowledge that is praised in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, is al-ilm al-nafi', the benefiting knowledge. And the benefiting knowledge is the knowledge, first of all, that is authentic, that it's the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the way it was known and taught and given from one generation to the other, from the Prophet ﷺ to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the ilm, the knowledge that the early generations of Islam they were upon. So this is the benefiting knowledge, the authenticity of it. The way of the Prophet ﷺ, the way of the early generations of Islam, in matters of aqidah, in matters of fiqh, and all matters of deen. And the benefiting knowledge also is what every person is in need of in his state of learning. So someone that starts to learn the knowledge of the deen of Islam, he has to be taken gradual in the major matters, and then he go gradually. That's why, for example, in the subject of the hadith, as the ulama that I always mention, we start with a book like the 40 hadith of Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah, because this is basically some of the comprehensive hadith that talks about the principles and foundations of the deen, and then a person can go further. So this is also part of learning what's benefiting knowledge. And if someone thinks that he goes ahead by learning other subjects of knowledge when he does not secure the foundation and the principles of the deen, does not follow the way of the people of knowledge and learning, it's like someone wants to learn medicine, but he finds a whole bunch of information out there. He doesn't go by the way that the people, the experts that they have put together, going to college, going to a certain way of learning, but rather he do it on his own. It doesn't work like that also with matters of deen. So this is also part of benefiting knowledge and learning the deen the way that the people of knowledge they have made clear from one generation to the other. And the benefiting knowledge also is the knowledge that brings the fear of Allah in the hearts. So every time we learn something, it doesn't increase the fear of Allah in our hearts, it's not a benefiting knowledge. And this is something that is true in every aspect of the deen, whether it's in matters of disputes, in matters of transactions, in fiqh, in usul fiqh, in mustalah hadith, in any matter. It should increase the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hearts, increase the love of Allah, increase the hope for the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, strengthens one's iman, because it's a benefiting knowledge that benefits the hearts, because it's translated into actions. And that's the fruits of the ilm, is to apply the ilm, to apply the knowledge that we learn. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء, that indeed those who fear Allah are the ulama, are the people of knowledge. So not just in applying that particular piece of information that we learn, but also it affects the things that we already know. So as way of being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the knowledge that we learn, it affects the way that we pray. It affects the way that we recite the Quran. And the more we learn, the more we perfect our matters of ibadah and seeking knowledge and so on. And that's of being grateful to Allah. That's why the shukr, forgive me for going out of the subject here, but the shukr, or to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as in one of the definitions of how the ulama, they define it, when they say صرف العبد جميع ما أنعم الله عليه به إلى ما خلق لأجله, which means when the slave of Allah directs everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestow upon him to what he has been created for. That's how to be grateful to Allah. That when you have everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon you of a favor, whether it's the air that we breathe, whether it's knowledge that we learn, anything, any of the favors of Allah, you direct all of that to one thing and one thing only, to the purpose of our life, which is the ubudiyyah to Allah, to worship Allah. And the worship of Allah, or the ubudiyyah of Allah, as we all know, is not just one act of worship. It's many different things, and that's what comes with knowledge. That means we're directed to be obedient to Allah in the matters of obedience to Allah, and knowing the levels of the deeds to fulfill the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the perfect sense. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who are grateful to Allah. As you see the hadith, it says عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما, the narrator of the hadith is Abdullah ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما. He said أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال, that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, لو يعطى الناس بدعواهم لادعى رجال أموال قوم ودماءهم لكن البينة على من ادعى واليمين على من أنكر. The hadith is a sound hadith, hadithun hasan, hadithun hasan. And رواه البيهقي وغيره وهكذا وبعضه في الصحيحين. So this is a sound hadith, and the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, he says لو يعطى الناس, لو يعطى الناس, if the people are given, يعطى with the dhamma on the ya in the passive tense, that means if people are given, if people are given, given what? بدعواهم. لو يعطى الناس بدعواهم, بدعواهم, by their claims. الدعوة is the claim, right? So the claim, that people can claim something, because people can claim anything. So if people are given what they claim, if anybody claim anything, then they are given whatever they are claiming. What happens? لَدَّعَ رِجَال, right? لَدَّعَ رِجَال. ادعى the same verb from دعواهم. لَدَّعَ رِجَال, men. So therefore men will claim أموال قوم, they will claim the wealth of others. They will claim the wealth of others. وَدِمَاءَهُمْ, and their blood. They will claim their wealth and their blood. We'll talk about that inshallah. لكن البينة على المدعي واليمين على من أنكر, which means, but rather than the Prophet ﷺ then making the matter clear, the bayina, the clear evidence from something clear. البينة على المدعي is upon the mudda'i, the one that claims. The one that claims, he has to come up with the evidence, with the clarity of the matter, that the matter has to be clear. وَالْيَمِينُ عَلَى مَنْ أَنْكَرَ, and the yameen and the oath is upon the one that denies. The oath is upon the one that denies. And this hadith is really has a lot of benefits and a lot of rulings actually. And a lot of rulings that in many different subjects of knowledge, especially in matters of fiqh, especially in matters of transactions. And first of all, as you see that it's the Prophet ﷺ, He's basically saying that people should not be given what they claim. Not everybody that claim anything, that means that they are upon something or upon the truth. And this is, of course, the hadith refers to rights and transactions and wealth and the like of this. So if someone, for example, comes forward and he claims that this piece of land is his, or this house is his, or whatever, anything, right? And he doesn't have any proof. Or he claims that someone stole his money or stole his car, or any claim. What happens when someone come forward and claims such a thing and goes to the judge or goes to the system and make a report against someone? He has to have an evidence. So if anybody that goes forward and he says, he has a dispute with someone, so he goes forward and he says, well, that person, he tried to kill me and he, got me wounded, and here's the wound, and that's from that particular person, and then people will take his claim and they would arrest that person and go further with this matter? Of course not. He has to have an evidence. So that's what al-bayyina al-mudda'i. He has to have an evidence, and the subject of the evidence is a totally different subject. Has so much details on it. What is to be accepted and what's not to be accepted. And there are some things, for example, in matters of the bayyina or the evidence, can be accepted or not accepted according to the Sharia. Some of it is very obvious. Someone that can use even, whatever means of evidence to prove whatever he claims. And some things, even if it proves, it does not makes the bayyina clearly for other reasons. Like, for example, if someone claims that a person had committed adultery, right? Can that person be punished as a result of that by the claim? Of course not. Can he be punished if even there is a video to show it or something like this? No, it's not permissible according to the deen. It has to be with the four witnesses, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, and it's meant to be this way. It's meant to be hidden. It's meant to be not exposed. It's a crime that is meant for people to conceal it and not to go around and accuse people with it, even if they have the evidence of it. Because this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from the people. And this is a different subject. But the point here is the al-bayyinatu ala man idda'a aw al-mudda'i. The bayyina, the evidence, has to come from the mudda'i, or the one that claims. And al-yamin, or the oath, is upon the one that denies. So if someone come forward again to the judge and he says that so and so a person, he took my money or he stole my money, and he doesn't have evidence. If you have evidence, the matter will go further, and then they will see. But if there's no evidence, can you do that? You can. Yes, you can. If you are honest, if you're truthful, someone took your money and you don't have any evidence of this, but this is something that you know for sure. So the person went to the court, went to the judge, and he said, and he claimed, and he made a very clear and registered a claim. Then the judge, in that case, he will bring the one that is accused forward, and he will present the matter to him, and either he accepts or he denies. If he accepts, then mashallah, the matter is good, and then they can go further. Even they can go further with matters of sulh, or bringing peace together. It doesn't have to be a justice that has to be applied. But if he denies and there's an evidence, there's no point of the deniance. I mean, the ruling will be applied on him. But if he denies and there's no evidence to prove that he had committed that crime, then should the case be dismissed? No. Why? Because as the Prophet ﷺ said, وَالْيَمِينُ عَلَى مَنْ أَنْكَرَ. He has to swear by Allah in front of the judge that he did not take his money or did not commit that crime that he's claiming that he committed. And that, of course, has a great wisdom, because so that the rights are not wasted if there's no evidence behind it. A person might, the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes present in his heart. He repents to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he knows that if he swears by Allah knowingly that he is wrong, that's called al-yamin al-ghamus. It's the yamin, or the oath, that would dip the person, make the person admitted into the hellfire, knowingly that he's swearing by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lying. That's a major sin, one of the sins that would make the person enter the hellfire. And some people, they take the rights of others by these oaths. So, but here the case, there's no evidence. So what can we do with the one that is accused of something and there's no evidence of that accusation? Either he says the truth or he denies. If he denies, then he swears by Allah in front of the judge that he didn't commit that crime. If he does this, then the case is dismissed and there's no harm on him. But still, he subject himself to the punishment of Allah if he did it. But also the benefit of it, again, as we see, that maybe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will revive his heart, that he would fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that state, and he would return back the rights of others, or he would say the truth. So that's why this is the perfect way of dealing with the rights of the people, more perfect than any system in the world, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet ﷺ such a thing. The hadith in the beginning, he says also, لَوْ يُعْطَى النَّاسُ بِدَعْوَاهُمْ. We have to be careful. We're living at a world that everybody's claiming anything. And sometimes many people, they take anything from anyone, especially if it fulfills their desires. And this is very clear in the subject of the news and things of that nature. If a person likes a president, for example, then he would take all the news that in the favor of that president. And if someone hates the president, for example, then they'll take all the news that brings all the different negative things about him, regardless whether this is true or false or whatever, taking the claims of people. And this is an industry that experts, they know exactly how to manipulate the people with all kinds of claims. But a believer is never deceived, especially if a person has knowledge. Why? Because of something like this, as the Prophet ﷺ said, not every claim that people make is to take from them. And because it doesn't have to be with matters of wealth and money and blood and things like this, it can be in things of your own perception of things, our own opinions of things, hate and love, and this can be translated into actions also. Because if a person have an idea about an individual, someone comes to you and he tells you that that person in the masjid, he is such a bad person or an evil person, claiming anything without any evidence. It's different if it's a nasiha, you're warning against someone and you have evidence of it and things like this, with a sincere intention for the deen, for the benefit of the deen. But a person just saying anything and then immediately a person would act then accordingly against that person. This is such a dangerous one. That's why لَوْ يُعْطَى النَّاسُ بِدَعْوَاهُمْ. People should not be given what they want by their claim only. And the evidence has to be a valid evidence. Not just that they have an evidence, it has to be a valid one. And this is it's a huge subject really in all matters, even in judging individuals, judging people of knowledge. Sometimes, for example, people, if a person, a alim, for example, or a student even of knowledge or something like this, makes a mistake, then they would say this is an evidence that that person is a deviant, for example. It is not quite as simple as this. There's ways of making the matter very clear. It doesn't mean that nobody is deviant, nobody falls into bid'ah innovations, nobody is from the people of Ahlul Bid'ah. Of course not. And that's why part of the deen of Islam is to warn against what is evil and to warn against individuals, those who spread evil. And this is a subject that is subjected to the benefits and the losses of things. And it's not an absolute matter, but it depends on what's the benefit and the losses of warning and not warning. And that's by the knowledge of the people of knowledge. So many subjects comes under this category or this wisdom that a person should have. But again, the hadith refers to, as it says, لَبْدَعَ رِجَالٌ أَمْوَالٌ قَوْمٌ وَدِمَاءٌ. That means in the subject of wealth and blood. Wealth, again, a person can take someone's wealth without the right to do so, claiming that he took money when he didn't, or vice versa. Or blood. If a person comes forward and he said, that person, he's the one that killed my relative, and he has no evidence of it whatsoever. Should they take his claim because he is a person of status, or because he is even the best alim in the world, of the most righteous, the best scholar of, and someone that is trustworthy and things like this? If he goes to the court and he says, and he make a claim against the worst person ever, the worst liar, the worst criminal, everything, that his record is very bad, and it comes from someone that is very righteous among the people. And he comes forward and he said, this person stole my money. Should they take his claim right away because he's such a great person? No, of course not. In matters of rulings of the dunya, then this is not to be applied whatsoever unless he himself has an evidence. And there's clear, examples at the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the times of the companions radiallahu anhum, where Ali ibn Abi Talib, for example, he comes forward as a Khalifa, and he claims that someone, and he was a Jew, that he took his armed shield or so, and the Qadi, the judge at this time, he's presented in front of him the Khalifa. That means basically he's the one that has authority over the judge, and the accused is a Jewish man. And he asked Ali radiallahu anhu if he has any evidence. When he said no, he doesn't have any evidence. And he asked the other, the matter was dismissed. But even the other one was as they say the story, this was a reason for him to embrace Islam, regardless of the authenticity of the story. But this is something that has been repeated so many times in the history of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and the early generations of Islam. So the Deen of Islam and the Sharia came to protect the wealth and the blood of the people. So that's why Shahada and the subject of witnessing, it's a subject in fiqh, and it's a subject also in matters of judgment and in the court system and things of that nature. And disputes between anybody, between husbands and wives, especially after divorce, between people in general, and things of that nature, then people have to make sure that they're upon what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them. If we talk about the different application of this, there are so many. And the more the person learns these types of subjects and matters of fiqh, you would see how perfect is the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though we already know that it's perfect by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'll stop here inshallah ta'ala because of the time. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all of us inshallah, and bless these days for us inshallah. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam, Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.